Hello there, I'm Alistair Bruce Ball, and this is 5 Live Cricket with our preview of the second test between England and New Zealand, which starts at Trent Bridge on Friday off the back of that absolute thriller in the first test at Lord's. Joe Root's magnificent unbeaten century getting England over the line, a rare test match win for them in recent times under the new captain-coach combination of Ben Stokes and Brendan McCullum, but they know New Zealand, as the World Test champions, will come back at them hard. So it's a tantalising prospect. Here to discuss it with me are the BBC's cricket correspondent Jonathan Agnew and the former New Zealand captain Jeremy Coney, both of whom you'll be able to hear on the Test Match special commentary, which starts at 10:25 on Friday morning on Radio 5 Sports Extra and the BBC Sounds app. Delighted to be able to speak to you both. Jonathan, I guess the first question as a neutral who was absolutely gripped and thrilled by the first test, do you think we're going to get more of the same at Trent Bridge?
Might well do, yes. Hello, Alistair. I mean, it's a bit of grass on the pitch. It's hard as well. I think the word from there is that it'll be a good strip, but there is that little bit of green that you want to see at the start of a test match, but not perhaps quite as damp as the Lord's one started out, and there the ball did hold sway quite a lot. It's Test cricket these days. It's interesting. People talk about it being a thriller and a nail biter, and it was. It's sort of with fine margins at Lord's. But at the end of the day, it is often good to see the ball dominating the bat to an extent. You don't want to see a flat pitch, but you also want to see better batting, I think, from both sides than we saw at Lord's. You want to see more consistent cricket. You want to see batsmen who are capable of defence, and that just is what Test cricket is all about, isn't it? It's a defence, it's counter-attacking, it's that ebb and the flow of the game. And yes, we did have that at Lord's, but not entirely for any other reason than incompetence to an extent. A lot of batsmen got themselves out, and I mean, I have a lot of sympathy for New Zealand because they've had no preparation at all. It's that same situation of players coming from particularly in the IPL, coming underprepared, and Test cricket still sort of bumbles along despite that. But you just feel that each series in this country that starts at this time of the year, you are crossing your fingers and you're hoping that the players are ready for it. You can't point that accusation at England because, of course, they have been playing county cricket. Their issue has been confidence and a total lack of it. So let's see what this one win, their second in 18 tests, has done for them. Certainly they're pretty positive down there at the ground today, but it's a question of how they're going to perform.
And Jeremy, in terms of that sort of ring rust that Jonathan talks about, from the tourist point of view, from New Zealand's point of view, there's really not been much time at all between the first test and second test. So what do you think we can expect from New Zealand in terms of sort of upping performance levels?
Well, I hope a lot better performance than we saw at Lord's in terms of the top order batting. Yes, they a number of the players in the top order, like Mitchell, Williamson, Conway, were at the IPL, so they've had 2 months of, short form cricket. They also, Williamson was absent from 4 or 5 of our test matches that we've played in the last year, but from a chronic elbow injury. Bolt missed 3 or 4 matches as well, so that it has been a slightly disrupted preparation. We were delighted when we heard there were 2 4-day matches prior to the series, but unfortunately it didn't quite work out. They didn't make the most of those. A couple of days rained out and so on. So it hasn't been ideal. I thought that the batsmen might be better prepared, especially in that first innings where they just played too wide at the ball. They didn't seem to know where their stumps were, and so that was costly. I thought the first test had its moments, but it really, there was a lot of loose cricket that you would say to your side, come on, we're better than that. We can do better than that. And so I think that's the area that I would like to see. While from the first innings to the second innings, New Zealand players batted a little longer, if you like. If you look at the scores in the second innings and the number of balls that they faced, they'll face more. So I guess they can look at that as a slightly upward curve. But they will know. They will know they weren't able to put their best out on the park, and they will be hurting for that. And I would think that the hope would be that we can do a lot better here at Trent Bridge.
Jonathan, in terms of sort of your reflections, as the dust has settled a little bit, on that, because it was helter-skelter and, as we discussed, sort of thrilling cricket at times. What sort of stuck with you a couple of days after from that Test match?
I mean, the main thing for me was that England won the game, and because of the fresh start, that was a really important step. There's no doubt about that. Even if they just crawled over the line, didn't matter how they got there, just to win a game. And to set off McCullum and Stokes in whatever direction their journey is going to take them together, but to actually win their first game together, I think was really important. In some ways, you didn't really look much deeper than that at the time, but now, of course, talking to Stokes, as I'm sure we'll hear, I do say to him, it's the same familiar people who got England through that game. It was you and Root. Matt Potts, of course, had a really excellent debut, but then it was Broad and Anderson with the ball predominantly. If you once you start analysing, then you'll see a lot of the same familiar issues. But just to have won a match and won the first game with these two together, in many ways, I don't think there's anything more important than that.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, Jonathan, I've actually got a question for you, sort of written down here on the sort of old guard doing it again for England and getting them out of a hole and winning them the game. But probably we should listen to the Ben Stokes interview first, and then I'll come back to it. So ahead of this second Test at Trent Bridge, obviously Ben Stokes has started with the win. England have named an unchanged team, Jonathan, which actually is, we're saying an unchanged team, but funnily enough, sort of Jack Leach plays that mean. So he was in that initial team, but he didn't last very long in the first.
No,
Test.
I had to read the thing very carefully to make sure what the unchanged team was, and it was the unchanged original team.
Yeah.
But that's quite significant because Stokes has got a really sore rib where he got a nasty blow from Bolt. And so if there was any doubt about him not being able to bowl, I think they'd have played Overton as some cover for Stokes. But I think the fact that they're happy to go with Leach suggests that Stokes will be able to play a full part.
Okay. Well, Jonathan's had a chat to Ben Stokes. So this is what the England captain had to say.
It's obviously been a very tough couple of years for us as a team, and you could sense the almost relief of being on the right side of a result for the first time in a while, and even like other stuff, just having the families and friends and families to come into the changing rooms, and then after having everybody back and actually being able to share some time, even with the opposition, because we've not been able to do that with COVID. So this whole summer's just felt a lot different, and back to normality, and just those, I guess the smaller things that we've not been able to do maybe have had some kind of lift within the group and stuff like that, because even just sitting back and just seeing everybody enjoying the celebrations with their family, the kids there, their friends and stuff like that was great, nearly as good as the actual win.
Yeah, I mean, did it make you realise how much you'd missed it actually, perhaps the impact that it had on the way that people were playing?
Yeah, obviously it's never great losing, so we did really enjoy the win, but the way that we've always tended to operate is sort of just take the here and now. We've got a new game to start next week, and we know that New Zealand are a very, very competitive side. I reckon we're very, very even in terms of especially playing in these conditions. English conditions generally suit both our bowling attacks, and doesn't give anyone the upper hand, I don't think. So we know we're going to be in for another tough challenge this week.
And you've got to know Brendan McCullum a bit better, I guess, than this last week. What's your impressions?
Yeah, I mean, the languages and the way that he speaks in the media is pretty much exactly the same. How he speaks to us up in the changing rooms, and he's just brought a great energy to the group. And I'm not sure if you were here yesterday morning seeing the game that we had with a couple of the coaches running around getting doinged on the head with some balls, and the penalty shootout this morning. And I just made a point to everyone that first and foremost, you're playing for England, you're doing something that you've loved, that you've grown up playing as a kid. Results and stuff will look after themselves, but it's just try and enjoy as much as we possibly can, and just always make sure that we're trying to have as much fun as we possibly can, because it'll all be taken away from us one day, and if you can't enjoy doing this, I don't really know what we can enjoy as sportsmen.
And how are you finding all this side of it? I mean, and that match as captain. I mean, you're normally someone who's training voraciously. You'd be out there in the nets. Now you've got to talk to me.
Yeah.
And how are you finding it okay? Not too disruptive, or?
It's a bit of ball ache, to be honest. I'm only messing. No, look, obviously, with the job, there comes more responsibility and stuff, outside of performing on the pitch and stuff like that. But I've really enjoyed it, and just tried to still be myself around the group and not put any more pressure onto myself. And because I don't mean to be blowing smoke up my own trumpet, but I've always felt that I've been someone that the lads have sort of looked to and how a way to operate, and so that's not changed. But yeah, just all the extra responsibilities of the media and stuff like that. It's always something that I knew I'd have to do, so that's fine.
So that's the England captain Ben Stokes chatting to Jonathan Agnew ahead of the second test on Friday. Former New Zealand captain Jeremy Coney with us as well. Jeremy, there's clearly, I think I've heard the word fun as clearly in that interview with Jonathan there. A lot of positive noise around the England camp, which you'd obviously expect, after a win like that. Is it too early to say, or could you sort of see a Brendan McCullum touch on things from that England performance in the first test?
Yeah, I think you could certainly. On the field, I saw a lot more smiling. Whether that was forced or not, I don't know. But the fielding, certainly. I think the more enthusiasm, the chasing of the ball to the boundary. Okay, it took Leach out of the game as it happened, and they can work out how they, instead of chasing directly behind the ball, perhaps come from a side, and you've got a chance that that won't happen. But that effort in chasing to the boundary, I think, is definitely a McCullum thing. And I think the catching and the slips has changed. The catching in that match from England was a lot different than I've seen in the past, the times that New Zealand has played. And so England have had to get, instead of 20 wickets, maybe they've had to get 28 wickets throughout a test match. And so that helps, doesn't it? And that's partially, just concentration and also enjoying it and chatting to each other and getting the parts of the game that you are involved in correct. Get it right. Don't be a shallow curve in the cordon. You've got to be steeper. You've got to be sort of the feet a certain distance apart. You've got to take the hands off the knees because that pushes your heels into the ground. You've got to keep, and it also separates the unit where you're catching with both hands together. Basic things that are so important, but they are starting to do those things now. And so I think all those things are McCullum things. I think the batting, I thought Lees, for example, in that second test match, started that innings by playing some nice little drives through the covers, and I don't think we saw that in the first innings. What we saw was a slightly helter-skelter Lees, really tapping it and running like mad and almost running himself out sometimes. So that's enthusiasm. Well, you don't get it right the first time, but it's important that you bring it in, and I think that did come from McCullum, yeah.
Just like to play you both a clip, actually, if I can now, of something I heard on the Tail Enders podcast from Jimmy Anderson, who's obviously in this group of players. And again, it refers to the impact that Brendan McCullum seems to have had. So this is Jimmy Anderson on the Tail Enders podcast talking about how McCullum took the pressure off the England players going to the third day of the test. This is what Jimmy's talking about here, when New Zealand were in a relatively strong position in their second innings at that point.
There's just been a good vibe about the group this week. So as an example, even that first day when we lost those wickets towards the end of the day, in years gone by we might have been too down about that and got worried about it, stressed about it. But the message from the coach and captain was we've bowled brilliantly, fielded brilliantly, started great with the bat, but in Test cricket you do have ups and downs. You have times where the opposition do fight back and get back in the game. So let's just park it and come back tomorrow and try as best we can. And even when they were 230 for 4 or something on the start of day 3, again we could be like, oh, they've got a big partnership, 2 guys nearing 100. You could look at you could feel down about it, but when the coach is sending you home, he's like, I'm so excited, we've got a new ball in an over. I'm looking around the groups, looking at the bowlers we've got. We can easily bowl them out for less than 50 tomorrow if we with this new ball, if we do well. So then you go to bed in a completely different mindset than maybe you would have previously when you're worrying quite a lot about or stressing about the match situation. So I've enjoyed that sort of positivity. I thought Ben's captaincy as well was really positive throughout the week. and all the bowlers bought into the attacking fields that we had, slightly different fields, and yeah, it's just been really enjoyable.
Jonathan, it really struck me there. Someone like Jimmy Anderson, who's been in that group for such a long time under
Jimmy's
so many.
sounding cheerful. Yeah.
Well, exactly, but has clearly been impacted, by that.
Well, if you speak to any of the England players, as I have been today, they'd all say the same thing. Frankly, they do feel that this is a very positive start. You got to be careful. There were very fine margins at Lords, and New Zealand could easily have won that match. And then where would we be? But the fact is that England did win that game. And as I say, that previous answer I gave to you, I just think at the moment that's really all that matters, and they're enjoying playing cricket again. There are smiles on faces. They're not the awful careworn faces that we've seen during the course of the winter. Stokes is interesting. I mean, he will very publicly back anybody who does anything positive. People were very critical of Johnny Bairstow's batting in the last Test match, but Stokes will say that's how he wanted him to play. He got 16 quickly. New Zealand didn't know what to do. He took a couple of great catches. He's really emphasising that sort of positive side of things at the moment. Alex Lee's 20, as Jeremy said, that again was picked out as being something that's really positive and really good. So that's where they are at the moment, and I think we just got to keep things level. And we did talk about taking baby steps at the start of this series and those sorts of things, and you really have no idea at the moment how consistent they're going to be, and that's going to be up to them to try and prove that. But the issues I think that we go into this game with is, okay, let's have a look at Lees, Crawley, Pope at 3. How long is that going to continue for? Johnny Bairstow batting in that sort of a way. I think Ben Foakes did himself an awful lot of good at Lords. Actually, the way that he played there at number 7, that would have calmed down some of the conversations about his position. And then I guess we'll have a look at Jack Leach and see how he bowls. But there's still plenty going on.
Yeah.
But the fact is that England have won a test, and they're not flying the flags outside my window here necessarily because of that. That's from last weekend, but it just feels as if that is something to celebrate because they are starting at such a low base.
The question, Jeremy, I was going to ask Jonathan about the old guard doing it again for England. You'll know as a nation, Jeremy, we can be quite a pessimistic lot, and even in sort of victory and joy, we're always looking for the potential. Well, this didn't quite go right,
Yes.
and that didn't quite go right. To me, is it a problem? I mean, the reason they are in the team and they are such great players, Root and Stokes and Broad and Anderson, who've come back and bowled so brilliantly, that is what they are there for, isn't it? I mean, should England fans be concerned with that sort of, well, they've needed the old guard to do the job for them again, or just sort of rejoice and celebrate in those performances?
Well, they're your best players, aren't they? And I think if you're going to play positively, you do need good players. It's simple as that. Otherwise, it's very hard to get the victories. And they've come through this, and Jonathan's right, just little steps for a start. And these players will get better or not, and some will fade away and some will come through, but they do seem to be, they give yourself a chance, don't you? When you are enjoying the game, you're giving yourself a chance. Now, it's just a case of how long will Pope keep that really positive attitude if he kind of fails 6 times in this series. And if that does occur, that becomes a little harder. But McCullum will look after that. He's had a lot of Test matches to play. He's had over 100 Test matches. He will have gone through 6 failures in a row, and he's still come out the other side. And as long as the players are actually working hard, and as you enjoy it, you want to work harder. So I see it's the right way to go about things. Certainly not to get down on yourself.
Probably an impossible question to answer, but you just sort of referred to it there, Jonathan. I think you said, will this top 3 be the top 3 by the end of the summer? I mean, do you get the feeling that they are going to get that chance?
Well, I think they'll get the chance. Crawley we know is capable of scoring big runs. It's just that his go-to shot, that booming drive from which he scores so many of his runs, is also where he tends to fail. He plants that foot, his eyes light up, he drives outside the off stump, and of course he does edge a lot behind, and that is frustrating. Ollie Pope is I just think such a talented batsman that just needs. I mean, he did get that score against South Africa a few winters ago now, and he thought that may be the turning point. But he has as yet not delivered on that potential. Now, will he do so? He'll certainly have the opportunity to do so. And again, as Jeremy said, you've got to sit down and reflect in a few games' time if this is working or not. And number 3 is such a critical position to be. I'm not sure it's really Pope's natural position, if I'm absolutely honest with you, but he is definitely good enough, and Lees has got a decent technique, although he's rather complicating matters with this rather strange stance that he's taking outside the off stump. He's really limiting his options there, I think. But again, he is experienced first-class cricketer, and it's worked for him. So you bring your game with you when you come, but the fact is, those 3 particularly need to score runs.
Well, on that note, why don't we hear from one of the England openers, Alex Lees? In the 4 tests he's played since his debut in the West Indies earlier this year, the Durham batters averaged just over 21 with a high score of 31. He spoke with the BBC's chief cricket writer, Stefan Schemmelt, yesterday.
I think I said to Baz, tongue-in-cheek, I think the openers are like the Volvos, and then you've got your Lamborghinis and your supercars coming in the middle order, and sometimes we might get through an hour and a half and maybe only get a 20 or a 30, but sometimes that is invaluable with the team. So I mean, obviously it's for you guys to take what you want from the innings obviously we play, but I think sometimes within the dressing room there's probably less significant innings that are probably internally really well received compared to maybe publicly. But we're all batters. At the end of the day, the top 3, we want to make hundreds, we want to make big runs, and we want to be the guys making the main contributions. But I think there's an acceptance around the top 3, particularly the new ball, that you are going to make some low scores. So it's important, obviously, when we do get in, that we make it count.
And what about just flipping it to the other side, Jeremy? What about New Zealand and their approach to this second test, and what they'll have taken from that first test, and what they're going to do about their team, because de Grandhomme is out?
Well, I think New Zealand will hope that they can, and it is more of a hope than an expectation, I think, that they will play a lot better and they'll score a lot more runs than they were able to do in the first test match. That will give their bowlers a little bit more to bowl at. I think that as far as the team is concerned, if Nicholls is fit, he was having nets at Lords, and he's been almost a week and a half now over this calf problem that he's had. So I would, if he's available, then he will play. There's no doubt about that, and he'll probably bat at 5. So therefore, Mitchell will keep his position and take de Grandhomme's place. I mean, that's the simple one. And New Zealand don't change generally things too much. There might be people who would say that Will Young at first, going in as opener, he's had a couple of failures against South Africa, and now he's had 2 here in England. But they won't look at that too hard. I don't think they will give him a chance again. The only thing is the bowling, I think, was with Ajaz Patel. If he's not going to be, and let's be honest, I mean, Kane Williamson has been consistently fairly cautious about using his spinners. If he's not going to use him at all, then there's no need to have him in the side. If that's the case, you've got to be practical about those things. And the first cab off the rank, looking at the way New Zealand played when the pitch went just a little bit more sedate in that sort of 4th innings and partnership started to develop, we need to have somewhere to go to when we can't get Southee and Bolt bowling over and over after over, and because they look fatigued. The same way that England did, actually, when Mitchell did. So you need to have someone. Now, neither side has got an attacking spinner that they can go to and say, here's the ball. And they don't really have an out-and-out quick bowler either. They can say, here, come and bowl us 5 overs or 3 overs. So there's similar sides like that when a good partnership gets going. So I think New Zealand would have to look at Wagner on that basis, that he does something a bit different if the pitch gets flat and something needs to be done. I think he would be the ones that they would look at if they're not going to play Ajaz Patel in this test match.
Well, let's get some thoughts from the New Zealand camp as well. We've heard from the England captain Ben Stokes, who was chatting to Jonathan ahead of the second test. Here's his opposite number, Kane Williamson.
Need to see the pitch, and Henry's going to look to get through training today. Love to give you a bit more on the team, but obviously factoring in Henry's inclusion. If he passes today, then there'll be an adjustment with the balance. Colin de Grandhomme obviously is not available, so a little bit to think through this morning, but we need to look at the surface too.
Kane, how much consideration do you give to bringing Neil Wagner back into the side?
Yeah, I mean, at this stage, with a couple of balls in the air, there's consideration for a few things, but we'll look to make those decisions as quickly as possible when the cover comes off the surface and we get a better idea of Henry's fitness.
So Test Match Special on from 10:25 Friday morning, which will obviously have Jonathan and Jeremy on. Jonathan, I see as well that Moeen Ali, guest summariser on Saturday and Sunday.
Sunday, yes.
Which would be great.
A nice slot during the lunchtime. Ask Moeen and you'll discover, if you don't know Moeen, what a lovely sense of humour he has.
Excellent. So listeners can get their questions in.
That's the plan.
Brilliant.
That's the plan.
Excellent. Jonathan, Jeremy, thank you very much indeed.